In the dusty scrolls of Genesis 38, buried between the rise of Judah and the birth of kings, lies the story of a woman few speak of, yet whose name echoes through eternity. She was wronged, betrayed, silenced, yet through her courage, God's promise to the world was preserved. Her name is Tamar. Today, we unravel her story, the scandal, the pain, and the triumph in a way you've never heard before. Welcome to Bible Stories with UG, where the forgotten voices of Scripture are brought to life with depth, beauty, and power. If you're new here, subscribe and join us as we journey through the Word in ways you've never seen before. In the days when Jacob and his sons lived in Canaan, one of his sons, Judah, the fourth-born, moved away from his brothers. He settled near a man named Hira of Adullam. There, Judah married the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. She bore him 3 sons, his firstborn, Onan, the second, and Shelah, the youngest. As time passed, Judah arranged a marriage for his firstborn son, He chose for him a woman named Tamar. But the scripture tells us in Genesis 38:7, Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. Tamar became a widow very early, childless and grieving. According to the custom of levirate marriage, it was the duty of the next brother to take her as his wife, so that offspring might be raised for the deceased brother's name. Judah then commanded his second son, Onan, to fulfill this duty. Onan married Tamar, but he was unwilling to give her children that would not be counted as his own. Each time he lay with her, he spilled his seed on the ground to avoid providing descendants for his brother. This act displeased the Lord greatly, and the Lord also put Onan to death. Now Tamar was twice a widow, still without child, and still bound to Judah's household. Judah, shaken by the death of his 2 sons, feared for his third son, Shelah. Though it was his responsibility to give Shelah to Tamar in marriage when he was grown, Judah did not want to risk losing him too. So Judah said to Tamar, "Leave as a widow in your father's household until my son Shelah grows up." But deep in his heart, Judah never intended to give Shelah to her. Tamar returned to her father's house, wearing widow's clothes, waiting, year after year, for a promise that would never be fulfilled. Tamar's desperation and Judah's journey. Time went on. Judah's own wife, the daughter of Shua, died. After his period of mourning, Judah went up to Timnah to his sheep shearers, together with his friend Hira the Adullamite. When Tamar was told that her father-in-law was going up to Timnah to shear his sheep, a plan formed in her heart. She realized that Judah had deceived her. Shelah had grown up, but she had not been given to him as wife. If she did nothing, she would remain forgotten, childless, and disgraced. Tamar removed the clothes of her widowhood. She covered herself with a veil to disguise her face and sat down at the entrance to Enaim, which lay on the way to Timnah. When Judah saw her, he did not recognize her. He thought she was a prostitute because she had veiled her face. Not knowing she was his own daughter-in-law, Judah approached her by the roadside and said, "Come now, let me sleep with you." "What will you give me to sleep with me?" Tamar asked. "I'll send you a young goat from my flock," Judah replied. Tamar said, "Will you give me something as a pledge until you send it?" Judah asked, "What pledge should I give you?" She answered, "Your seal, and its cord, and the staff in your hand." Judah gave them to her, and he slept with her, and she conceived by him. Afterward, Tamar went away, removed her veil, and put back on her widow's garments. Judah tries to cover his tracks. Later, Judah sent the young goat by his friend Hira the Adullamite to get back his pledge from the woman, but Hira could not find her. He asked the men who lived there, "Where is the shrine prostitute who was beside the road at Enaim?" "There hasn't been any shrine prostitute here," they said. So he went back to Judah and said, "I didn't find her." Besides, the men who lived there said, "There hasn't been any prostitute here." Judah replied, "Let her keep what she has, or we will become a laughingstock. After all, I did send her this young goat, but you didn't find her." And so the matter was left as though nothing had happened. Tamar exposes Judah. About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of prostitution, and as a result she is now pregnant." Judah, burning with anger and hypocrisy, said, "Bring her out and have her burned to death." As Tamar was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. She said, "I am pregnant by the man who owns these." And she added, "See if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff these are." Judah recognized them and said, "She is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah." And he did not sleep with her again. The birth of Perez and Zerah. When the time came for Tamar to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. As she was giving birth, one of them put out his hand, so the midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it on his wrist and said, "This one came out first." But when he drew back his hand, his brother came out first, and she said, "So this is how you have broken out." So he was named Perez. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his wrist, came out, and he was named Zerah. Tamar's legacy. From betrayal and broken promises, from rejection and disgrace, Tamar's story closes not with shame but with the birth of sons. Through Perez, Tamar became part of the royal line that would lead to King David and ultimately to Jesus Christ, the Messiah. The story of Tamar in Genesis 38 is full of deep life lessons, even though it is one of the most difficult and overlooked stories in Scripture. Here are the key lessons we can learn from Tamar's story. Lessons from the story of Tamar. 1. God works through the broken and forgotten. Tamar was widowed, abandoned, and treated unfairly by Judah's family. Yet, God used her situation to continue the family line that would eventually lead to King David and Jesus Christ. Lesson: no matter how broken or overlooked you feel, God can still bring purpose out of your pain. 2. Injustice does not go unnoticed by God. Judah failed to fulfill his duty to Tamar by not giving her to Shelah. Society forgot her, but God did not. Lesson: people may wrong you, but God sees, and he will vindicate you in his time. 3. Righteousness is not about appearance but about truth. Judah wanted to publicly shame Tamar, yet he himself was guilty of deception. When the truth came out, Judah admitted, "She is more righteous than I." Lesson: true righteousness is not in outward appearance or social status, but in integrity and justice. 4. God can turn shame into legacy. Tamar's situation could have left her disgraced forever. Instead, she became the ancestor of kings and of the Messiah. Lesson: God has the power to rewrite your story, turning shame into honor and despair into hope. 5. Hypocrisy destroys, but humility restores. Judah condemned Tamar to death without realizing he was the guilty one. When exposed, his humility in admitting his fault prevented further harm. Lesson: before judging others, we must examine ourselves. Humility opens the door for God's mercy. 6. Women have dignity and value in God's plan. Though Tamar was marginalized in her culture, her courage and persistence preserved the family line. Lesson: in God's story, women are not forgotten, they are vital, courageous, and honored. 7. God's grace is greater than human failure. Judah failed as a father and as a leader. Tamar acted out of desperation. Yet, God's grace worked through their failures to bring about his redemptive plan. Lesson: no failure is too great for God to turn into a testimony of grace. 8. Patience in waiting for justice. Tamar waited years for Judah to keep his promise of giving her Shelah, but he never did. She endured neglect in silence before acting. Lesson: sometimes justice seems delayed, but God's timing is never late. 9. Desperation can lead to bold action. Tamar disguised herself to secure her rightful place in the family lineage. Though her method was unusual, her determination preserved God's covenant line. Lesson: God can use even unconventional moments of courage to accomplish his will. 10. Hidden motives eventually come to light. Judah thought Tamar had wronged him, but in truth, he was the one withholding what was rightfully hers. Lesson: sooner or later, truth reveals itself. God exposes motives, and justice will be established. 11. Our mistakes don't disqualify us from God's plan. Judah failed Tamar and acted unrighteously, but God still restored him and even allowed his name to be honored in the lineage of Christ. Lesson: failure is not final when we return in humility to God. 12. The importance of accountability in family roles. Judah had a duty as a father-in-law to protect Tamar, but he failed in his responsibility. Lesson: families are called to care for one another with love and responsibility. Neglect brings pain. 13. God includes the marginalized in his redemption story. Tamar was a Canaanite, not an Israelite, yet she became part of God's chosen lineage. Lesson: God's grace crosses cultural, social, and racial barriers. No one is excluded from his love. 14. Confession leads to healing. When Judah admitted, "She is more righteous than I," he exposed his guilt and stopped further harm. Lesson: acknowledging sin brings freedom and prevents deeper destruction. 15. Legacies are shaped by courage. Tamar's boldness ensured the birth of Perez and Zerah, who became part of Israel's covenant story. Lesson: sometimes it takes courage to secure a future of hope for generations to come. 16. God uses unlikely people for his greatest purposes. Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba, all women with difficult pasts, were included in the genealogy of Jesus, Matthew 1. Lesson: God doesn't choose based on status or past, he chooses based on his divine plan. 17. What man intends for harm, God can turn for good. Tamar was shamed and nearly destroyed, but God flipped her story into one of honor and legacy. Lesson: even when people mistreat you, God can transform the pain into purpose. 18. Every story matters in God's bigger picture. Tamar's story may feel messy, but without her, the lineage of David and Christ would be incomplete. Lesson: your story, even the broken parts, has a place in God's grand design. Tamar was never meant to be forgotten. Her name lives in the genealogy of Jesus. Her courage, her faith, and her resilience shine through history. And just as God redeemed her story, he can redeem yours too. Tamar's story teaches us that God sees the unseen, defends the forgotten, and redeems the broken. He is the God who turns shame into honor, victims into victors, and forgotten women into pillars of history. This is Bible Stories with UG, where the hidden voices of Scripture come alive. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories of faith and redemption.